coming into it, I think what I realized right away was the way you spoke about the other composers that you hinted to, there was a respect there. And, you know, as much as musically, I wanted to make sure that what I did aligned with the vision of the world, it was almost as equally important to make sure that, you know, the vibe that I brought as a person would work. And that was a great challenge because then it couldn't be 100% derivative, but it had to be something that could resonate really well with what you guys had already done. When I wrote what my thought would be for the next progression, I was just expanding on the world that you guys had created already. And then now we're in production and it's like the writers essentially say, well, this is the world and here's this other important character, and all of a sudden it made complete sense. It was kind of a primer for me in the sense that I learned quickly, like, okay, no, these are the boundaries that I have melodically, I have to stay within, and harmonically, but also texturally. There's still a range of like, there needs to be a, whether it's musical naivety or a certain innocence, I guess, or rawness to it. And so for me, one other latch point was I made sure that even when I was recording the instruments, I made sure that you wanted this dry, intimate sound.
Yeah.
But when I would listen to this stuff, I was like, yeah, there's that, but there's this wide expanse, you know, which matched the landscape.
That must have been quite difficult, right?
You would think it would be, but it actually was in some ways liberating. Like the more limits placed, working within the parameters of like your guys' sound that you already developed. You talked about cross-pollination. It's cool to be able to take, I mean, not in the sense that you want to completely take over somebody's palette. None of us want to do that, but just being able to just grab one layer that's similar and kind of sift it in to the musical dough that we're creating.
I mean, that's an interesting picture. I think it's just adding a new facet to our library of sounds and also styles, right? So stylistically, I think the interesting part about adding you to the project was you bring in something fresh. You have your own, like, you know, history of, you know, writing music for different types of genres and all that kind of stuff. But it also just made total sense because it felt so natural. It really fits in. So we have this kind of, you know, we have this vision about this project, what we want to do, and this chunk is missing. And it was just like a perfect slot in there.
That's the interesting thing, isn't it? Is how does that lead into the sound for Forbidden West? In that, what's the difference between the approach to, you know, Horizon, Zero Dawn, and Forbidden West? In that there's sort of an evolution there.
What was the basis of it? We were doing an arc.
No,
we had
Lucas,
this kickoff.
you took the three main new story arcs that weren't in the first one, and you gave one to each of us, didn't you?
Yeah.
And we
wrote a suite for all of their situations.
Which in our kind of suite process is maybe quite a long piece of music where we try and explore what it might sound like in all the different ways you might write music for this person. So we to make it really basic, we always imagine we'd try and think up a theme for that character or arc. We'd try and put it in a more of an ambient exploration setting, and then we'd also, because it's Horizon and this is a big part of it, we'd also try and get a little flavour of what they might be like in combat, so that when we then later on in the project come back to that story arc, whether it be a cutscene or a big piece of combat music or a zone, we have a starting point.
Yeah.
You were doing Aloy's journey again, but Aloy had changed a lot.
Yeah, and that was an interesting concept, wasn't it? Is to sort of have the original theme or have the original character, but knowing that she's going to have a very different journey. And that was a sort of a big part for me, is knowing part of the story, in that things are not all great. It's perhaps the way I can say it. Is that, you know, there's been this, you know, at the end of Horizon Zero Dawn, there's been this sort of catharsis of like, I've resolved something, but there's actually realization that that doesn't mean that everything in the world is resolved. And so there's almost an element of sadness or an element of impending doom or impending danger that was really interesting to weave into that theme.
We also felt the world is like one big aspect of it, but actually Aloy's journey through that's the key thing that we really need to focus on this time around.
Basically, maybe it might be nice to kind of talk about what actually we are doing differently this time around. A lot of stuff that we changed based on our observations in Frozen Wilds in the first game. I think the biggest thing which we will talk about is emotion and the way that works in our game. The first game was based around locations and tribes and stuff like that. And since we have a more emotion-based system now, we were losing that. So we looked to you, Niels, and we asked you, would you be interested in doing that? Because you did a lot of tribe research before.
Yeah, well, that was a fun assignment, to say the least. As with Horizon Zero Dawn, it was looking at what these tribes would sound like, determining what the sound palette was for example, the Oseram, what kind of people they were, really digging into all the research you made, the lore. It was a search, to be honest.
This isn't the music that they play, it's just scoring for their area and their location.
So I did, it started with the Oseram and after that the Utaru, I believe.
Yeah.
That was a completely different research than the Tanact, which are much more gritty than the Utaru and they sound like that. And for all the tracks, I used new instruments that I didn't own previously. And for the Tanact especially, Lucas just kept nudging me, saying, make an instrument, a plank with all the strings, and then, you know, and in the end I did, and it worked.
Of course. It did.
Okay, so in 5 words, what do the Oseram sound like?
Blunt, big hits.
That's 2 words.
Non-melodic.
Okay, that's enough. That's 5. Utaru.
Lyrical, harmonious. The Tanact, gritty, aggressive, like gritty guitar string, dirty strings.
Now the big thing that we changed is that actually all the music you hear continuously, we can nudge that in a certain emotional direction.
So basically, you have a circle. It's like a pizza, using the pizza analogy again. Every pizza has a bunch of slices. Each slice represents a different emotion that Aloy is going to experience throughout her journey during this whole arc. Each slice of the pie represents an emotion that Aloy is going to go through. And at any given point, essentially, you can go from this emotion and transition through like a transition piece into another emotion. And the idea is essentially throughout the course of the game, you are essentially, you know, dynamically, based on what happens in the game, you're basically going from one emotion to another. And we are essentially like the emotional friend, you know, that supports you on your journey as you play as Aloy going through the game.
We have 3 different states.
Yeah.
Aloy is exploring and doing stuff, not really engaging in anything. Then we got the engaged state, which means he is doing something related to an activity, but not fighting. And then we got the vigorous state, which is fighting stuff.
Yeah.
And so when you got your emotion calm and you got your state vigorous, and I think you had that one when you played.
Calm fighting, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously not everything works one-on-one, but it does give us the possibility to kind of have a whole pool of music for anything you want to do within that one emotion that will go well together.
Yeah, and it vertically, basically it passes through. You can go from, you know, calm, vigorous, back to calm, idle. And essentially the idea was that we could jump at any point from state within or jump to another emotion as well. The thing that I found interesting wasn't so much the different emotions as much as the role that emotion played. So like the difference going from idle to engaged when you're doing something kind of grandiose and you're feeling like you're on top of the world, figuratively or literally. I thought that was really interesting because that is a great way to hook in and connect the player with the character. Like as a player, there's nothing better than that feeling of like, I'm empowered, not just with a power up or something, but I'm actually empowered emotionally.
There's a second layer to this, which we spoke about when you first unveiled the Nexus to us all, which was actually, it's getting us to write in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really powerful thing, especially on a sequel, where she's still in the same world. It's still the same lead character. You've still got the same people writing the music apart from Oleksa. That's one of the solutions to keeping it fresh.
Yeah. Basically, we're looking at the world through the eyes of Aloy. Like, that's really our paradigm. It's like really.
It's not even her eyes. It's looking at it. What her story arc.
Exactly.
Internally, what she is using a lot, telling us no, but it's her on her own, and this is what she's feeling here.
Now you have all that music material that is, you know, categorized in all those different types of emotions, and you know, throughout like a game production, like, you know, an open world game, there's so many occasions where you can create something special if you have the fitting content.
We have a whole new music tool being written for us internally. We can have all those variations actually in the same track, where we needed to bounce them out separately before, and you would hear that we would go to a new track. Right now we can start a track in a really full arrangement, and it gets close to midnight, for instance, and suddenly we kind of play a very bare version, or only the melody. We got all these kind of transitional things that we never had before. I'm really excited about that.
But there's also something about the story, though. I mean, I don't know if you guys feel this, but for me, it definitely feels that things have sort of shifted to a slightly darker and slightly more intense and more aggressive palette.
There are some darker things that are going to happen in this one, and
She's been through a lot already.
Yeah.
Quite.
Yeah,
exciting.
and just fleshing out those longer arcs, and that's really our mission. We want to tell stories.
Yeah.
We want to take the player on a journey, on an emotional journey through the eyes of Aloy.
You know what I remember from Horizon Zero Dawn was that I think Epilogue was one of the last cutscenes that we did, and it's basically the one where the player lets go of Aloy.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that scene with Joris's music.
Yeah, it's a bit
It was
tear-jerky.
like, oh, it's done.
Yeah.
You know, and it was almost like physically I had to say goodbye to. It sounds so weird, but I had to say goodbye to Aloy for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember that moment, and I am in a way looking forward to that moment, but also not really.
Yeah.
Because you've been, each project is like going through a journey.
Yeah.
But there's also the excitement, isn't there, of because you don't know what people are going to sort of attach themselves to. Because you put things in there and you hope that they're going to like the bits that you like, but at the same time you can't predict what people are really going to, really sort of appreciate. And that's part of the excitement.
Yeah.
And it's again that process, isn't it, of seeing people, seeing YouTube videos of people playing it and discovering things and going on that journey that you've already been down on a couple of times, but people are sort of discovering for the first time. There's something really, really quite magical about that.
I'm looking forward to that point where we've done everything, and there's that moment that I know at least all the projects that I work on, there's a certain point where I get goosebumps. There's the goosebumps at the start of the project where you're excited, but you're also nervous. But then there's the goosebumps at the end when you realize something special.
Yeah.
And this has all the DNA to be something really special.